Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's
If you've ever wondered what happens when the Democratic Party leans too far into socialism, buckle up. It's like friends saying, don't text your ex, and then of course, they do it anyway. Bill Maher went after AOC, Bernie Sanders, and rising socialist Zoran Mamdani in what isn't a minor critique, but a full-on political intervention. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and comment to share if you think the Democratic Party is genuinely shifting left or just putting on a social media show. Your thoughts fuel the discussion. Picture this: Bill Maher, lifelong Democrat, like the sober friend at 2:00 a.m., watching everyone else take tequila shots, glances at AOC and Mamdani thinking, stop. Think about political survival. Naturally, they don't. They push harder. AOC recently used the classic get to know him line to defend herself against critics, including Maher, basically political Tinder for socialism. Swipe right. The irony is palpable. AOC talks about open-mindedness and deep dialogue, but rarely extends that to Trump or most conservatives. Her selective empathy is striking, and even her party's moderates are raising eyebrows so high they're practically in orbit.
The skeptics, though, in the party want to keep him at arm's distance, some who have some problems with him, even some fellow New Yorkers in the swing districts outside the city.
Get to know him. Get to know him. You know, this is not about having any kind of hard line. I think that if anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, you should meet him before.
And Maher, he's not buying it. On Real Time, Bill Maher pulled out one of his favorite comparisons, the view of capitalist South Korea shining bright at night versus socialist North Korea, dark like someone forgot to pay the electricity bill, to warn Democrats about where he thinks this is headed. Maher seized on examples of countries like Venezuela, which was once wealthier than Poland in 1990, before broad socialist policies led to shortages, runaway inflation, and economic collapse with citizens fleeing in huge numbers. Basically, a greatest hits mixtape of failed economies, and stressed. That no place, not even New York, has a secret formula that makes socialism work. Maher even challenged the idea that single-payer healthcare was a winning policy by pointing to an attempt in sin. Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont, with its 626,000 people, as a cautionary tale about complexity and cost, saying if that couldn't work there, why assume it could on a national scale? Then there's Zoran Mamdani, personable, youthful, and enthusiastic. But Maher says many of his big ideas could lead into economic sinkholes rather than sustainable solutions. Looking at the Democratic Party, Maher asked something like, is anyone else noticing this? Instead of celebrating the hype, rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says Maher insists they all study history, and history, he points out, has never actually proven socialism successful in its present form. And Maher hit a pressure point with Sanders. For decades, he's pushed big ideas like single-payer healthcare for all 340 million Americans. Yet even smaller-scale efforts have run into trouble, raising questions about what success would look like.
I think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in.
Maher often reminds people that Mamdani, Ayok, and Bernie Sanders aren't your typical Democrats. They're socialists who still support democracy, a completely different kind of political player, and they wear that label proudly. The issue is that most voters don't notice the difference, which causes serious brand confusion. But Maher's biggest point is that these same politicians who spend so much time criticizing capitalism owe all their fame and platforms to the very system they're railing against.
Profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing.
Bernie Sanders' books, Ayok's brand deals, social media following, and public influence. All of that wouldn't exist under real socialism. You don't become a superstar critic in a socialist system. Instead, the system critiques you, and suddenly you vanish.
Is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
And that's the contradiction Maher can't stand. The people saying capitalism is broken are the ones thriving in it. Now, that's not to say capitalism is perfect. Maher admits it's messy, inconsistent, and often frustrating. But compared to socialism, which has a flawless track record of failure, capitalism looks like the reliable partner in those viral toxic relationships. TikToks with one spouse causing chaos, while the other quietly pays the bills. That's capitalism. The ex holding a gas can. That's socialism. Maher then turned to Abigail Spanberger, the newly elected Virginia governor, who predicted years ago that the party would collapse without returning to the center. Her advice was simple: don't brand yourself socialist. Elections are won by moderates, not extremists who make headlines but not victories. She succeeded by staying moderate, yet the party ignored her advice, tossing it straight into the ideological recycle bin. By now, Maher's frustration is obvious. Like a disappointed parent, moderates aren't running the Democratic Party. Its fringes are dominated by the loudest voices representing Twitter more than actual voters. Supporting radical candidates isn't bravery, it's political Russian roulette, with 4 bullets in the chamber instead of just 1.
Nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, lady?
And the silence from the moderate majority is deafening. That quiet isn't neutrality, it's permission. When a party won't check its extremes, those extremes don't just influence the party, they become the party. The numbers back it up. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump carried, and not a single one was a Democratic socialist. Every think tank studying those elections reached the same conclusion: move to the center. Even the New York Times agreed. The middle ground is the smart path, and the radicals are wrong. Yet the Dents ignored the advice, letting chaos take over instead of acting. They're not just sidelining moderates, they're doubling down on socialist messaging. quietly pushing aside capitalism and flirting with socialism like, hey, you up?
Party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after.
Maher argues that putting ideology above electability is the fastest way to lose elections. He points out that the Dinks' biggest setbacks came when they went all in on woke theatrics, symbolic crusades, and fringe issues. Voters don't want political TikTok performances. They want a party led by people who understand that Twitter isn't reality and who show competence and balance. And he's right. Americans, left, right, or center, want stability, not revolution. They want solutions, not socialism. Yet the Dents acts like a friend who keeps asking, why do I keep dating toxic people? Even after all the warnings, still embracing socialism, and then wondering why it backfires.
Quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to. Thing is, socialism will because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked, like Kevin Federline.
Maher makes another big point. Socialism isn't just a failure. It's a spectacular one that doesn't fade quietly, but crashes hard again and again. And he points to repeated historical patterns of shortages, runaway inflation, broken services, and millions of people leaving countries that embraced it. On Real Time, he cited examples like Venezuela, once among Latin America's richest nations, where socialist policies helped turn it into one of the hemisphere's poorest, with shortages, outages, and around 8 million people fleeing the crisis in recent years, one of the largest migration movements in the world, arguing that if socialism really were the rule, the result wouldn't be prosperity, but collapse rather than growth.
Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Then Maher goes back to Bernie Sanders' Vermont experiment, and it's too obvious to ignore. On paper, single-payer healthcare sounds amazing, inspiring in speeches, but in reality, it fell apart like wet cardboard. Costs skyrocketed. The numbers didn't work. And this was Vermont, one of America's most liberal states, basically the perfect testing ground. If Vermont couldn't make it work, how could New York, a huge, complicated, and expensive city, succeed?
Wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Maher's final point is clear and blunt. On paper, democratic socialism can look appealing, like a dating profile full of perfect photos and inspiring quotes. But in reality, the results are very different, often ending in economic trouble. He's been making this point for years. Fringe ideology isn't what Americans want. People want pragmatism, competence, and common sense. If the DNC hopes to win in 2028 or beyond, they need to stop chasing ideological purity and start appealing to the voters who actually decide elections. Will they do it, or keep ignoring moderates at their own risk? Only time will tell. That wraps up today's commentary. Hit like, subscribe for more analysis, and leave a comment. Is the party just taking a temporary detour into fantasy?